Melissa was just at home by herself. He forced himself into her home.
Her killer wrapped his hands around her throat and was squeezing very life out of her. Rumor on the street was that the boyfriend had committed the crime.
Prior to Melissa's death, they got involved in an argument.
One of the phone numbers in Melissa Lee's phone book was for something called the Nightline. She had met someone on the Nightline.
At this point, how could detectives crack the case?
They needed some sort of solid evidence that would link someone to the crime.
The last few moments of Melissa's life were violent and horrific.
You know there's a predator out there. How is he still walking the streets?
Now our goal is to find out absolutely everything that we can about this guy.
He said, I knew that's what this was about. He paused, he looked at the ceiling and he said, I'm sorry.
Hi, I'm Nancy O'Dell. Today's Crime Exposé takes us to Bothell, Washington, a quiet suburb just northeast of Seattle. It was the last place anyone would have expected an 8th grader to be abducted from her own home. But that's exactly what happened to 15-year-old Melissa Lee. And when investigators uncovered the sinister details of the crime, it confirmed a dangerous predator was on the loose in their community. And until he was caught, no young woman would be safe.
April 13th. It was gray and foggy outside when Sharon Lee placed a frantic call to police.
911, what is the emergency?
Sharon called 911 to report Melissa missing.
Sharon said at 2 a.m. she had returned home with her boyfriend, expecting to find her 15-year-old daughter Melissa sound asleep, but instead walked into a chaotic scene.
When they got home, they discovered that the front door to their Bothell home had been kicked in. The living room was in disarray. Furniture had been overturned, a drink had been spilled, and there was a pack of cigarettes left in the living room that didn't belong to anyone in the Lee family.
And did any other clues stand out to them?
They smelled a sharp chemical odor in the air.
Just a few hours before, at 9:30 p.m., Melissa had called her mother.
Melissa was just at home by herself, and she was asking her mom if her friend Krista could come spend the night.
But the sleepover never happened.
Yeah, her friend that was supposed to come over ended up babysitting late for a family, and so her friend just was not able to make it that night.
Officers asked Sharon for a description of what her daughter had been wearing.
We found out that she was last seen wearing a pair of pink shorts. She had a black San Jose Sharks sweatshirt on.
The details of Melissa's disappearance were alarming.
It caused a lot of concern for law enforcement. So obviously we were working with potentially maybe someone who was maybe kidnapped.
Just hours later, the missing persons investigation ended in the worst way possible when 2 women walking over the Edgewater Creek Bridge made a horrific discovery.
After Melissa's mom filed the missing persons report in the morning of April 14th, later in the afternoon, there were 2 women that were walking across the bridge in Everett. The bridge is called the Edgewater Creek Bridge, and they had looked over the edge and observed what appeared to be a female's body on the ground below.
The victim's clothing confirmed the awful truth.
She was wearing pink-orange shorts and a black San Jose Sharks sweatshirt. The sweatshirt and the bra that the woman was wearing underneath had been pushed up over her breasts, so they were exposed. And it appeared as though she had fallen from the top of the bridge.
The medical examiner's report told a grisly story of the 15-year-old's last moments alive.
We learned that Melissa's cause and manner of death was strangulation.
At some point, Her killer wrapped his hands around her throat and was squeezing, the very life out of her.
Blood was found on Melissa's shorts.
The blood stain was on the rear of the left pant leg of the shorts.
Some of the blood found on the shorts did belong to Melissa. Some of it belonged to an unknown male.
And there was more.
Her underwear was on backwards. That, taken together with the fact that her bra and sweatshirt had been pushed up over her breasts, suggested that there was a sexual element to her murder.
And was there biological evidence discovered?
Yes, there was male DNA eventually found in Melissa Lee's underwear and in some of the swabs that had been taken from her body at autopsy.
The toxicologist report provided even more disturbing clues.
With the toxicology screen that was done on Melissa's blood, common street drugs were absent, but they did discover that she had some ether in her system, which was kind of surprising.
How about how the crime unfolded? What did the evidence tell you about that?
He came to her house when she was alone. He forced himself into her home. He subdued her with the historical anesthesia ether. Something that's notable about his apartment is it was only 3.5 miles away from where her body was recovered. Our theory is that the defendant used carburetor cleaner or some other type of commercial solvent to subdue her, most likely by placing that chemical onto a rag and using it to, hold up against her face and nose and mouth, so she had to breathe it in. The last few moments of Melissa's life were violent and horrific.
Who would have had a motive? Who would have had the opportunity?
"15-year-old Melissa Lee had been abducted from her own home and strangled to death. For Melissa's little sister, who had been out of town that night, the pain was almost impossible to bear.
She was a very kind heart, loving. She just had a beautiful soul, beautiful heart. She was just a beautiful person all around. I looked up to her. I wanted to go everywhere with her. I wanted to do everything with her, but she was just somebody that I just wanted to be around 24/7.
The brutality of the crime hit her family hard.
When my grandpa told me, somebody had killed her, it didn't click. I guess it was more shock, just to think who could do that, who would do that, who would take her. And so it took a while for it to sink in. To be honest, I'm 42 years old and it still is hard to believe sometimes.
Investigators narrowed down the moment when the killer had struck.
We believe that the incident occurred between 11 p.m. and 2 in the morning.
And it had been a rage-fueled attack.
The last few moments of Melissa's life were violent and horrific. She was alone at the time, and we know that she put up an intense struggle.
Melissa's friends led detectives to zero in on a suspect.
The rumor on the street was that the boyfriend had committed the crime.
His name was TJ Peters. He and Melissa had just broken up days before her murder.
Records showed TJ had been on the phone with Melissa shortly before she was killed.
The night that she went missing, Melissa and TJ had been talking on the phone pretty frequently, and TJ seemed pretty annoyed that Melissa kept calling him.
As they dug deeper, even more red flags were raised.
Prior to Melissa's death, they got involved in an argument.
But Melissa's ex denied any involvement in the crime. Detectives asked him to take a polygraph.
The polygraph failed.
The evidence against him was stacking up.
The threats, the recent breakup, the failed polygraph is one of those things that made law enforcement really take a hard look at this kid.
Detectives looked closely into his whereabouts at the time of her abduction.
It turned out that TJ had an alibi for the night of April 13th.
And ultimately, his DNA did not match the evidence in the case.
They were able to say that T.J. Peters was not the person who killed her.
So law enforcement pressed on and scoured through Melissa's room for clues.
One of the things that detectives did pretty early on in the investigation was take Melissa's calendar, her day planner, and her phone book from the Lee residence in order to go through her thoughts and maybe look for things that other people didn't know. They also took a number of writings from Melissa's room.
Law enforcement quickly learned Melissa had been using a social phone line called the Nightline.
Anytime the phone rang, we always knew it was for her.
Melissa had been talking to people on the Nightline. Nightline was a phone number that people could call into. It was kind of a connector line that would connect people who were currently on the phone with each other, who may be complete strangers with each other.
So would you say the Nightline phone was sort of like online dating?
I think it's fair to say it was an analog version of online dating or dating apps.
It is essentially a think Tinder, but you use your phone and not a computer.
But detectives were unable to link anyone Melissa might have encountered to the crime.
It wasn't clear how many people in her phone book she had met on the Nightline.
The investigation was back to square one.
You know there's a predator out there. How is he still walking the streets?
At this point, how could detectives crack the case?
They needed some sort of solid evidence that would link someone to the crime. They need some sort of break.
The investigation into Melissa Lee's murder had hit a brick wall. But 27 years later, with cutting-edge advancements in DNA technology, authorities were convinced the unknown DNA profile left at the scene would be the key to unlocking the case.
Back in the end of 2018, we learned about genealogy, and so that profile was processed. The male DNA that was located on Melissa's shorts, that profile was uploaded into CODIS, which is a national database back in 2001. And there was never a hit because that male's DNA was never in a system. So it tells me that he was never a convicted felon.
And through the painstaking efforts of forensic genealogists, they focused in on a name.
The likely source of the DNA found on Melissa Lee's body belonged to someone named Alan Edward Dean.
At the time of Melissa's murder, Dean would have been 35 years old.
Now our goal is to find out absolutely everything that we can about this guy. Does he have any history that would indicate this is something he might do? Is there anything that he has done previously that makes him look suspicious or makes us think that, yeah, we're on the right track here? Assuming he's the assailant, how did their paths cross? How does he come into Melissa Lee's life to the extent that he's able to take that life?
Notes in Melissa's day planner revealed the teen had met Alan Dean on the Nightline, but he had gone by a different name.
Yeah, there was a name and a phone number in the phone book that Melissa had written down that a detective called. And the name written down in the phone book for that phone number was Michael. The detective who called that phone number for Michael talked to a man and found out that that man's name wasn't Michael. The man's name was actually Alan Dean. But Alan Dean told investigators back in 1993 that he used Michael when he would go onto the Nightline and the chat line and when he would talk to people.
When investigators dug into Alan Dean's past, they discovered shortly before Melissa's murder, a young teenager in Arizona had accused him of a shockingly similar crime.
Alan Dean was a suspect in a sexual assault involving a 13-year-old girl, where he provided the 13-year-old girl alcohol and marijuana and was in bed with her. And she had passed out, woke up the next morning, and Alan Dean allegedly said, "I hope I didn't get you pregnant."
But he was never prosecuted for the crime. Armed with the evidence against him, detectives brought Alan Dean in for an interrogation. But he refused to talk.
Why don't I read the first one? You can tell me whether you understand that one. How about that? You have the right to remain silent. Do you understand that?
No.
Okay. What part of that do you not understand? I'd be happy to try and explain it to
I
you.
don't understand anything that you're saying.
Okay. Is it a language barrier or is there...
I decline any and all offers of contract, and I don't concede to any presumptions. I comprehend you're just trying to do your job, but I can't make any legal determinations on any of the questions that you're asking me.
Okay.
So what I'm getting from you is you don't want to answer any of our questions today.
I decline any and all offers of contract, and I don't concede to any presumptions.
Well, we weren't able to confront him with the evidence because the interview didn't go down that path. When we entered the interview room, when we tried to talk to Mr. Dean, he would just keep saying the same phrase over and over again. So it became very apparent to us that he was invoking his right to remain silent and he wasn't going to answer our questions.
So what I'm getting at is no matter what we say or what we ask, you're going to respond with that same answer. Is that correct?
I comprehend you're just trying to do your job, but I can't make any legal determinations on any of the questions that you're asking me.
That's fine, sir.
I scooted up to the table and I said, okay, listen, you're under arrest for the kidnapping and murder of a 15-year-old girl in 1993.
I'm going to take that as you are refusing to cooperate with us and to answer our questions. You're under arrest for murder in the first degree and kidnapping in the first degree from a 1993 case.
But when detectives left the room, the cameras kept recording, and what Alan Dean said next was a bombshell.
I knew that's what this was about. I'm sorry.
He said, I knew that's what this was about. He paused, he looked at the ceiling and he said, I'm sorry.
When you heard him say, I'm sorry, what went through your mind?
I think we were all kind of shocked when we saw that. I was like, holy Toledo, he just confessed his murder.
That was his confession.
He always knew that day would come. He knew that we had caught him.
It had been a long and hard road to find the predator who had robbed Melissa Lee of her future.
For a middle-aged man to be able to sexually assault and murder a 15-year-old girl is someone who is evil. There's no other way to put it.
But nothing will ever replace the joy that Melissa brought to everyone who knew her.
I miss her smile. I don't even remember her voice. I don't get to hear her laugh, so it's hard. And I think that's the hardest part for families is trying to get over the pain of losing somebody like that.
At the end of his trial, a jury found Alan Dean guilty of first-degree murder. The 62-year-old was sentenced to 26 years behind bars. And now, it's time for today's Safety Spotlight. While this case began on a chat line, which is similar to online dating, the principles of safety remain the same. Children between the ages of 12 and 15 are especially at risk for manipulation, so it is critical for parents to talk to their children about online predators. Parents should discuss risky behavior and examples of healthy and unhealthy relationships, so your child can be on the lookout for red flags. Talk to your children about the dangers of sending and receiving sexual messages and photos. Additionally, parents may want to consider firewalls and surveillance software to monitor their child's online activities and make sure their location setting is off. Visit staysafeonline.org for resources to help teach online safety to kids and adults. Or you can call 1-800-843-5678 to report crimes against children. I'm Nancy O'Dell. For all of us here at Crime Exposé, please join us next time and stay safe.